brand new Hell Month hoodie and t-shirt. Check it out right now. The Midnight Mafia, but no, this isn't the front. What? It's the back? Check it out. Midnight Mafia assemble. Let's go. Welcome back to Hell Month, episode 3, and today I have a brilliant, crazy, dramatic, suspenseful story for you. For those of you that have seen the movie Wolf Creek, I'm about to tell the real tale, the real story behind that, because if you've seen the movie, first thing you see is based on true events, and it actually was. And if you haven't seen the movie, well, it's about 3 hikers that are going to this place called Wolf Creek, and it's in Australia, and it's basically this 3-hour walk up until you see like this huge crater where like a lake used to be. I think it was an asteroid impact. It's kind of a crazy picture, right? But then when they get back down to their car, it's not starting for some reason. So they just wait, they're trying to figure things out. Then all of a sudden a truck comes from the distance, and when the truck comes in, a guy kind of gets out ominously. It's 2 girls and 1 guy, by the way, who were going on this trip. The guy kind of walks up to him, and then all of a sudden you see Mick Taylor, this kind of hero in a way, as he's kind of like this old bloke, like that's not a knife, this is a knife type thing. I don't know if that was English or Australian. I'm sorry to my Australian people, but you know what I mean. A friendly, happy-go-lucky guy. I got you, mate, no problem at all. I'll hook you up to me car, we go back to my place, and I'll get you fixed by the morning. So they kind of, seem to trust him right off the bat just because of his such overwhelmingly friendly demeanor. So they say, okay, thank you. I mean, we are out in the middle of nowhere. So he hooks the car up, and then he takes off with the 3 of them in their own car in the back. And as they're just, sitting there, minutes turn into hours, and they're like, where does he live? Like, this has been hours. And they're like, yeah, well, we are out in the middle of nowhere. So they finally get there about 3 hours later, and when they get out, there's this little fire pit, and they're sitting sharing some stories, and the guy asks them if they want water. He's got this big gallon thing of water, rainwater he calls it, and of course they all take a sip, not knowing that that water had something in it. Now from this point in the story, it's a cat and mouse game with each one of them. Will they be found? Will they get out alive? I'm not going to ruin that for you, because if you haven't seen it, you really need to see it. It's such a good movie. But today is the actual events, which are different from the movie, so you can still go and enjoy the movie. But yes, this is the real story of Wolf Creek, Hell Month, episode 3, or should I say, the real story of Salt Creek. As of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. So every year, thousands of people disappear in Australia's vast wilderness, and some of them are found, but others are never seen again. But for 3 young travelers, what they encountered in the outback was far worse than just getting lost. In the endless miles of red dirt and barren landscapes, something sinister lurks beneath the surface. And like all the best stories, it starts with seemingly ordinary roads and long, lonely drives. So we're going to go back to January 25th, 1990. A young Englishman named Paul Onions is standing by the side of the road. Backpack slung over his shoulder, thumbs out, just hitchhiking along Hume Highway, which is just outside of Sydney, Australia. It's a classic backpacker move, and Paul's just like so many of the other traveling through that Australia's vast open spaces, the freedom of the road ahead and the kindness of the strangers behind him. What could possibly go wrong? And that's when a white Toyota Land Cruiser pulls up alongside him. And the driver was a man in his, early 40s with a handlebar mustache, and he introduced himself as Bill. So at this point, he seems friendly and ordinary enough, so he offers Paul a lift, saying that he can take him part of the way to Melbourne. And grateful for the ride, Paul hopped right in. And at first, it was just kind of a pleasant conversation. The man Bill asked Paul about his travels, what he's been doing in Australia, and for a while, everything seemed perfectly fine. But then, about 45 minutes into the drive, things started to change a little bit. The man's mood started to shift. He became tense, his eyes, darting to the rearview mirror. His grip on the wheel was kind of frightening. And then the car slows down, and Bill pulls over, claiming that he wants to grab something from under the seat. It was actually a cassette tape. It's a small thing, but Paul notices that there are already a lot of tapes that are right there in the car, and there's no reason for Bill to pull over just for that, right? Either way, his odd senses or spidey senses, whatever you want to call it, are going off. And then, before Paul can even really react to what's going on, Bill reaches underneath the seat and he pulls out a length of this rope and a black revolver, and he points it right at Paul's face. "This is a robbery," Bill snares. And for a moment, time seemed to stop. But then Paul's, instincts kind of took over him. He unbuckled his seatbelt real quick, he flung open the door, and then he bolted away from the car. And believe me, he's running for his life, zigzagging across the highway with Bill shouting behind him, "Stop or I'll shoot! Stop or I'll shoot!" And that's when Paul hears a gunshot crack right through the air. But he doesn't stop, not for a second. He keeps running because adrenaline is pumping through his veins right now, and he refuses to look back. But there's cars on this road, and multiple cars are swerving, trying not to hit him, and nobody stops to help. He's completely on his own, and Bill is now gaining ground on him. And just as Paul reaches this kind of grassy median in the middle of the highway, Bill grabs him, tearing off his sleeve. And for a split second, Paul thought it was over. But then he sees a random van approaching. And with no other choice, Paul throws himself in front of it, forcing the driver to slam on the brakes. And that's when the door slides open and Paul jumps inside shouting, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun, go." So at this point, the van, just kind of screeches away, leaving Bill standing in the dust. Paul is shaken, but alive, and he reports the incident to police. But it will be years before he learns just how lucky that he truly was. Fast forward 3 years later, the bodies of 7 young backpackers are found in the Balango State Forest. And they were murdered by the backpack killer. His name was Ivan Milat, the man who called himself Bill that day. And Paul had escaped literally by the skin of his teeth from one of the most notorious serial killers in Australian history. You can't make this stuff up. But the bad guy in the movie Wolf Creek wasn't just made off one villain. It was actually made off 2 villains and kind of mixed together to form one. And this is the other villain. So fast forward to July 14th, 2001. Another couple of young travelers, Peter Falcone and Joanne Lees, are just driving along Stewart Highway in their orange Kombi van. And they've been backpacking through Australia, exploring, the outback, and now they're heading north to a place called Darwin. And it's just after sunset at this point, and the highway is starting to get dark and desolate. Then, out of nowhere, kind of like in the movie, kind of not, headlights appear behind them, and a white Toyota pickup truck approaches them, flashing its lights on and on, its high beams, signaling for them to, pull over. Peter is kind of worried and cautious at this point, but he kind of assumes that there must be something wrong with his van. But Joanne, sitting in the passenger seat, she feels really uneasy about it, but they stop anyway. And that's when Peter kind of immediately steps out to, talk to the driver, who was a man in a baseball cap with a mustache and a dog in the passenger seat. He told Peter that there were sparks that were actually coming from his exhaust. So thinking this is, just a simple issue, Peter walks to the back of the van to check with the man. And that's when Joanne, all of a sudden out of nowhere, hears this kind of loud bang go off. For a split second, she kind of thought that the van just kind of backfired, but that thought quickly vanished when the man is suddenly now standing right at her window, knocking on it with a revolver. And then he points the silver revolver right at her, and he orders her out of the van, his voice calm, but filled with this inside menace. So Joanne is scared out of her mind at this moment, but she is forced out of the Kombi van, and her hands are tied behind her back with cable ties. And this is when her mind starts to just race. And Peter is gone. She doesn't know where he is or even if he's alive at this point. And now she's completely at the mercy of this man with a gun. But that's when Joanne decided she wasn't going to go down. Not at least without a fight. And as the man tries to, binds her ankles with rope at this point, she just kicks and she thrashes, refusing to, make it easy for him. And at this point, he's enraged by that, so he punches her right in the head, leaving her kind of shocked and stunned. But even in the fog of pain, Joanne knows she has to act fast if she wants to survive. And that's when the man kind of just drags her to his truck and then tosses her in the back. And he threatens to shoot her if she doesn't stay calm and still. At this point, Joanne's breath comes in these shallow gasps and her heart is pounding really hard in her chest. She hears the man now walking away back to the combi, and she knows this is her only possible chance. So ignoring all the pain that's going on right now, she kind of wriggles her way out of the truck and then bolts into the thick, dark bushland. And that's when the branches just start tearing at her skin and her clothes, and she doesn't stop though, she continues to go. And she can now hear this man's footsteps behind her and sees his flashlight sweeping through the trees as he searches for her. So at this point, she kind of crouches down, with her heart still racing, just praying that he doesn't find her. Now, for what felt like an eternity, Joanne stays hidden, listening to the sounds of the outback around her. Finally, she hears the sound of the engine starting on the truck and then the truck driving off. But she's seen horror movies just like me and you, so she doesn't trust it. She stays in her hiding spot, terrified that this is a trap and that he might be kinda coming right back. But time just keeps passing, so when she finally emerges, bruised and bloodied at this point, she stumbles back into the highway, unsure of what to do next. And that's when all the pain set in and the adrenaline kind of dumped, and she just collapsed and was too weak to move on the side of the road. And that's when she hears the sound of an approaching vehicle. But she hesitates, was it him again? But thankfully this time it's not the man with the gun. It's a road train, one of those, massive trucks that cross the outback. So Joanne quickly waves it down, and the two men from inside the car come outside, and they stand and they cut the cable ties that were around her wrist, and they take her to the nearest town at that point, which was Barrow Creek. Now, while Joanne escaped, Peter wasn't so lucky. What she obviously did not know at the time was that after that man had shot at Peter, he actually scrambled across the road trying to escape. Because when I heard this story, I thought, oh, Peter is shot. But no, Peter actually tried to escape. And that's where the vast, empty outback, just stretched out before him. And Peter, once again, ran for his life, zigzagging across the dark highway, desperate to get away from this man who was now hunting him down. And that's when he darted right into the shadows, ducking behind bushes, doing everything that he possibly could to avoid the headlights of that white truck. But the outback was vast, and Peter was alone. Unfortunately, the man did catch up to him, and Peter Falcone was never seen or heard from again. And also, his body to this day has never been found. And it would also take years for Joanne's attacker to be identified as Bradley John Murdoch, a mechanic and run runner with a violent past. And the evidence that linked him to this crime scene was undeniable, because it was DNA that was found on Joanne's shirt, the cable ties, and from inside the combi van. So 4 years after the incident in 2005, Murdoch was convicted for Peter Falcone's murder and Joanne Lee's abduction. But like even milat, he has never revealed the location of Peter's body. So Joanne survived, but the scars of that night stayed with her forever. So from Paul Onion's daring escape to Joanne Lee's harrowing survival, the Outback has proven time and time again that it holds as much danger as beauty. And these are real stories, after all, that inspired the movie Wolf Creek, tales of killers who preyed on the isolated, the trusting, and the brave. And though justice came for the monsters behind these unspeakable horrors, some questions remain unanswered. And that's because the outback is vast and beautiful, but it also holds a bunch of secrets. And it's not particularly kind to those who venture too far out into the unknown. So, if you're ever in a position where you're thinking about going a little bit further on your hike, just over that ridge, next time, think twice. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes of Hell Month yet, I'm gonna put them up right here, and I'm telling you, as we build up to Hell Month and we get to eventually 16 episodes, they're gonna get more intense and more intense. And not to mention, 4 episodes will be on my podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Apple. It's called Mystery Files with Mystery, and just search and look it up and you'll find it. But that's all I got for you guys today. I'll see you next time. Cheers.